I had two grandpas. One lived in Logan and one lived in Idle Falls. They were both outstanding grandpas. Grandpa Davis was probably one of the richest men in Idle Falls. He'd buy property and then he'd resell it. On a clear day, you could see the Teton Peaks. My dad used to like to drive up there and drive down into Jackson Hole, which is in Wyoming. And it was about a 60-mile drive, I guess. The road up on the Teton Peaks would go up and up, and it was winding and up and up and up. It was actually a scary road. You'd look down. What if we went over this cliff? What if we went over this cliff? I remember being scared, climbed on that drive, and my Grandpa Davis says, I want to go with you. I thought, that's kind of strange. I remember us kids were in the back seat with Grandpa. We just started up the mountain when Grandpa says, let me out, let me out. That's crazy, huh? How in the world could you let him out and then drive over there and come back and pick him up? I was old enough to think that was kind of a crazy thing to do. Well, it was my grandpa's plan. He didn't want us to go there. And my dad says, well, we might as well call this off. He purposely went with us to make that drive. I was kind of glad he did. That's something I remember. Grandpa deliberately stopped us from going over that path.
Mother used to be sure we said our prayers more often. And so we had to say a prayer when we first got up, and then we'd have a prayer to bless breakfast. And then we'd have a prayer before we go to school. And Mother insisted we did that. And Dad used to give us a nickel so we could go to the drugstore next door and buy some candy. And I thought that was a good deal. I thought that was really neat that he'd give us a nickel and we could go next door and spend it at the drugstore. So I'd take my nickel and go next door and buy me a Coke, a bottle of Coke. And they were in glasses. They weren't in bottles, they were in glasses. And I used to go next door and buy them. And one day Dad came in and said, what are you doing with your nickel that I give you every week? And he says, well, I go next door and buy me a Coke. What? You buy yourself a Coke with that nickel I give you? And I said,
yes, I love Coke.
And he says, no, you don't. I'm not going to give any more nickels. You can't buy a Coke. Coke has caffeine in it. And if you drink caffeine, it's bad for your heart, it's bad for your body, it's bad for your nerves. And I don't want you ever drink a Coke because it has caffeine in it. So promise me you'll never drink a Coke ever again, and I'll still give you a nickel, but you cannot spend it on a Coke. Kids next door to me would go in and buy a Coke, and I'd get me a stick of licorice or some Tootsie Rolls or something else, but I would never buy a Coke. So do you know what? I'm now 94 years old and I still haven't had a Coke because I promised Dad I would never drink a Coke. Trouble is he didn't tell Jim that, and Jim still drinks Coke. But Jim has struggled through and lived to be 98 without him. So, I mean with him, so I guess they're not as bad as my dad told me.
I never drink a lot of them.